Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, we're doing a really fun video. These are the kind of videos I really love doing. Today, we're looking at my top 10 favorite decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, this is like right now, so this may not look exactly the same as my top 10 favorite archetypes of all time list or anything like that, but right now, when I think about Yu-Gi-Oh!, these are the 10 decks I enjoy the most. There are a couple of decks randomly, like I guess shout outs to like Subterror Knights that I really like, love the aesthetic, like the way they play it, their control deck, but they're just not even playable. And for me, someone who plays like a somewhat meta, most of the time, I got to play decks that are at least playable. So without further ado, let's just get into this thing. We got 10 decks to run through. Not going to spend too much time on any one deck individually, but number one, of course, is Rika. Big fan of this deck, or sorry, number 10. Did I say number 10 or number one? Number 10 is Rika. Really cool strategy. I love that this was kind of like an underdog strategy, that it came out in a set where Adamant's Pair and Eldritch took off as the two best decks in the game immediately. And then like after that, like we had to like figure out that Rika, after like one little wave of support way down the line, become way better. You've got insane cards like Rika that's just like Alistair for plants, but better. You got like insane new support cards like Rika Princess. You got insane extenders like the Mudon and Snowdrop. When you combine it with the Sun Avalon package, it gets like another extra bump. Glamour's insane. Con is one of the most insane legacy support cards we've seen in a while. It's just Lair of Darkness that also pluses you, which obviously gives it a sweet spot in my heart as well. Then Sheet being an insane interruption. Of course, some of the extra deck stuff, also being really cool. Strana, such a cool card. It's a +1 that then gets you into an interruption. The deck is really cool. It's really fun. I like that it doesn't feel like a full-on combo deck unless you're doing like the Sun Avalon stuff. Otherwise, it feels more like a mid-range strategy that plays like a Lair of Darkness type game, which is really cool. And yeah, I just vibe with it a lot. Definitely one of my favorites right now. And I also love these combination decks where you just kind of combine the best of a single type. This is just the best plants have to offer right now. Rika's, Sun Avalons there, and I love it. So yeah, there you go. Number 10, Rika. Moving on to number 9, we have Code Talkers. Kind of another one in that same vein as Rika, where Rika's kind of the best the plants have to offer. Code Talkers are kind of an amalgamation of what Cyber's cards have to offer. Now we have the new core set announced that could have even more Cyber support. Very excited to see if there's anything addable to this in there, but this deck's crazy, right? Like you have like crazy and generic cards available to Cybers, like Debug, like your Signet Minings, Ibly, the mini coders are awesome. Now we have the new Math Mech engine, which is insane. Of course, all the generic extenders that Cybers just has access to that are crazy. Codex, one of the most insane just like type support cards we've ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! And so much more. Really cool. I love that this deck like has power, but also can play a mid-range game because of stuff like Code Talker Heat Soul. Just if your main plan goes awry, you can just make him draw a bunch of cards and even end up out-resourcing your opponent by the end of the day. It's honestly insane. I like this deck a lot. I'm not usually a big combo player. This is one of the more combo-y decks I mess around with at any given moment, but definitely one of my favorites, and I'm always on and off on this deck, coming back to it because I just can't help myself. That's number 9. Moving on to number 8, Maureen Says. You knew this was going to be in the top 10, and we were getting Maureen Says support announced. Like I was talking about it almost like once a week for a while, doing videos on it, theory videos on how good it, like what do we want to get for the support, what's the perfect stuff. And man, they like had to have been like an 8.5 out of 10 compared to everything I asked for. The only thing I could ask for at this point for Maureen Says is another good trap that maybe is removal instead of negation, and then I'd be sold. I'd be all over this deck all the time. Still do like this deck a lot. It's a really strong resource deck. Doesn't really do like combos. It more like does like these mid-range combos that just gets you to like your super advantage friendly combo that gets you a couple interruptions, and then it just resources your opponent. And it's one of those decks where like you only really need to play like 20 Maureen Says cards, which means you just have 20 free slots in the deck to just go ahead and play like whatever you want. So hand traps, board breakers, whatever you want. You want it, you got it. I love decks that play Link 1s. I haven't mentioned this yet. Technically, both the decks prior to this play Link 1s as well, but for some reason, like, I totally agree when people say, like, oh, don't give an archetype a Link 1, it's just going to make it too broken. But when I play decks with Link 1s, they feel so fluid and nice to play that, like, I still just really enjoy it. Even though, like, I do agree with the premise that, like, Link 1s are, like, stupid broke. You know, you got crazy cards like Coral Enemy, new cards like Coral Triangle and Aqua Argonaut as well, and then obviously classic Bubble Reef. But really cool archetype. I like this as like one of those cyber strategies that doesn't really work with a lot of other cybers cards. So it is like its own entity. It's not like Code Talkers that can combine with stuff. It's not like Salamangreat that ends up playing like other, you know, cyber stuff at times. It's its own thing and it plays really, really pure. Next up, Earth Machine. Earth Machine is so fun to play. I mean, I would almost say like over the last like 2 months, this has been the deck I've played the most. Again, it is a deck that kind of has some somewhat more developed combo aspects to it, which is not usually my style, but what I like is that this combos into like a control setup. It's not comboing for 6+ negates, unbreakable board, baloney. It's comboing to like a draw 2 plus multiple interruptions, and it does it like really well into hand traps, that kind of thing. The deck inherently has a lot of ways to play second because of the trains, as well as Machina are just inherently pretty good going second. And this really is like, you know, I said it for the Rika and I said it for Code Talkers, but this one probably more so than any of them is like the true combination of just the best Earth Machine cards Yu-Gi-Oh has to offer, and there's a lot of them. Trains, Machina, Infinitrack. Technically Ancient Gear has a small package in here. Therians have a package in here, being super nice support, right? There's so much stuff in here. I love it. Even Sky Strikers found that into my list at some point. Like, there's just so much cool stuff. It plays a couple traps. It plays so many interesting, cool extra deck cards that like really don't see play in any other machine decks. And it's really, really fun. It's definitely one of those decks that's really rewarding, a little bit harder to learn, but once you get there, oh man, it feels so freaking good. So yeah, definitely Earth Machine or Mystery Machine, whatever you want to call it, for, what is that, number 7 for me? Hell yeah. Now I move to number 6. This is an oldie but a goodie for me, Subterror. I feel so bad for Subterror. If you were to give me like, oh, give me your just of all time favorite archetypes, this may be like number 2 on that list behind Lair of Darkness. Seriously. I love it. But the problem is this engine has been power crept so freaking hard. I would love it if we could get support in 2022 for this, maybe even 2023. I think this should be like a structure deck consideration. I think this should be a consideration for one of the archetypes in like a core set that gets just like 4 or 5 cards, because I'd love to see them flesh this out. People were so mad that this engine is just like, oh, it's an Omni Gate, and then you just play a ton of Floodgates. But if they actually develop the engine, I truly believe people would like it more, because it's going to end on more like powerful boards in terms of like what their engine gets you, but you don't have to play so many degenerate cards like your stupid Floodgates that people just hate. And it'd be more consistent that way because you're just getting to your engine more often and going off of that. So I'd love to see it. It's the first deck I ever played on an actual competitive level during toss format. No joke, guys, if I did not get matched up against a Sky Striker player, I would literally be like 90% win rate with this deck. Like, I'm not kidding at all. Like, I could not lose to anything but Sky Striker. But yeah, City's amazing, Final Battle's amazing, Guru's amazing. They have a handful of really, really clutch cards. They just need a couple cards to just help round it out. This could even be borderline the weakest deck I have on my list here today, arguably. And so I'd love to see support for them. I think they're just so power crept. I'd love to see that. That's number 6. Moving on to number 5 in our top 5 here. Dinomorphia, really, really cool one. New strategy from this year. I love it. I love that they have 2, not 1, but 2 normal traps that literally just like are their whole strategy. I love that it just needs 1 card to resolve for you to get to like your main boss monster, and it's so easy. It does it on your opponent's turn. It's a trap deck that actually is pretty good going second, because if you can just make Rex turn, you're just skill draining your opponent going second in the form of a 3K body that can lower your opponent's attack stats, so it becomes harder for them to even like try and walk into this while their stuff's negated. Absolutely crazy. I love the way this deck plays. It's really, really cool. The only thing I could ask for this deck is like 1 more main deck monster, just because it feels like the second, like Therese is amazing, right? And then it feels like Diplo's just kind of meh. But if they gave us 1 more really cool card, then like maybe they could make Diplos a little better. Maybe if they made a guy who, like, if you control a Dinomorphic, can reborn himself from grave. That way Diplos would be like a 1-card rank 4 into like a one of the Evilzars would be really cool, but I don't know. Like, I get it. We'll see though. That'd be really cool, but you know, maybe it's just a dream. But yeah, Dinomorphia, really, really cool strategy. I love it. You guys know I love trap decks. Easy number 5 for me. Now we get into the top 4. This is where I would say, well, I would probably throw Dinomorphia in here. Like, top 5 solid. Like Really, really enjoyed. These are my style. I love the aesthetic of the designs and everything, all that stuff. But number 4 is Trap Tricks. Now this one, it could actually legitimately might have a chance to move up to, like, not kidding, number 1 slot on my list here in the future. We now have a structure deck announced for Trap Tricks. So excited to see what we end up with there. But until we get that, I still like them. I think what's crazy is that they took a deck like this that's like Rogue. I think I would almost put this deck pretty close to like where Subterrors are, somewhere similar. And like the fact they just said, yeah, you know what? 5 to 8 more cards for them. Let's do it. I'm so stoked to see what they come up with. It doesn't even have to be amazing. As long as it's like decent, this deck could legitimately jump from like low level Rogue. I'd be happy with high level Rogue, but if it even gets up to like tier 2 and like a legitimately playable deck in the format, I'd be stoked about that for sure. They just have so many good cards, right? And obviously Sarah's insane. I talked about this earlier. I love how I love decks that play like really easy fluid link 1s, and especially in the form of a control deck like this, even better. I would assume they're going to make some power creeping trap holes. Maybe trap hole cards that can play going second would be kind of nice. Like maybe even something that can be activated like Imperm on your opponent's turn going second would be crazy. I don't know. I really don't know what to expect. I just expect something, and that's all I need to see. But very, very stoked for Trap Tricks. Easy number 4 for me. Moving on to number 3, Zephyr. You guys have seen me talk, especially over the last year, a lot about Zephyr. This was my favorite competitive strategy to play for a while. It was performing really, really well, and I still don't think it's that bad. I think the only thing is that we've seen the meta take a nice jump in power level, right? With tier and with the, of course, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on their names? The sprites. And in that, you know, it just becomes a little bit harder for these decks to play. Luckily, this is a shifter deck, so like that is one thing that you can play that kind of helps you go second in a lot of instances. But going first, obviously, setting up like your path is like insane, but it's crazy. I mean, it's the only pendulum deck on my list. It's one of the very few pendulum decks that can actually play a control game, which I freaking love. Yeah, because I think inherently, like, a pendulum deck that can play a grind game, can play a slow game, is inherently broken, right? Because if you just maintain scales, you're able to pen summon every turn, and it just means you grind like the dickens. So this deck definitely embodies that. I would love to see support for this deck. I don't think it necessarily needs it, but if they wanted to go out of their way and give us like a counterpart to Zephyr to be like, so you could have double scale copying cards, it'd be like pretty insane. But yeah, yeah, I think they're still really cool nonetheless. Just a control pendulum deck. Like it just doesn't exist, except for like Zephyr's really. So there's my number 3. Moving on to number 2. Maybe a shocker to some people. Lair of Darkness has dropped to number 2 for me for a long time. I mean, maybe I would have argued over last year Zephyr sat at number 1 just because they were my favorite deck to play in a more competitive scene. But Lair of Darkness always floats around as like my favorite deck usually, but I think it has just taken a step back. I still love this strategy, but to be honest, we got the new strategy that's actually number 1 for me, and it's so similar to this strategy, but just does it so much better. You know, I harped about, can we just get a normal trap card that summons a Lady of Lament out of the deck? That would be so huge. We never got it, and then like the new deck kind of does it a little bit better. Obviously, they have access to like the Ties of the Brethren plays, and like a cool boss monster like Darkest Diabolos, and so much more, right? Like obviously being able to search any normal trap in the game with Lilith is really strong. And when the deck works, it rotates resources like crazy. But the problem is like getting started, getting going with the deck. And that's kind of where you can struggle. But I still love it. I still hold out hope here. They're going to get multiple cards that help them out in Darkwing Blast. So like they are getting better. But I still think they're outclassed by the number 1 deck on our list here today, which is without a doubt Labyrinth. I already made a deck profile on this. I probably already mentioned it in multiple posts or whatever, so you might already have seen this coming, but Labyrinth is my favorite deck in the game right now. I think it is just so similar to like what Lair of Darkness does, but just like it just does it way more fluid. They have the normal trap that summons out their monsters. They have like all of their monsters are like, I don't know, they have ways to like not brick too much. You don't have to play too many normal summons. The fact that your Torby and your Chandraglier can set stuff from deck, but they don't need to be normal summons. So you don't need to play hardly any normal summons, which even makes stuff like Lava Golem in the side or Sphere Mode in the side actually possible. There's just so many other reasons. I love that you get to play a lot of traps, heavy trap deck for sure. It gets even better in Dark and Glass, like a lot better. I would argue this gets more better than Lair of Darkness gets better. Because they actually get their other in-archetype boss monster. They get the Link 2 that helps them like spam the board more. And I'm a fan. I'm just having a lot of fun playing this deck. Still trying to figure out siding with this deck more than anything. I feel pretty good about the list. It's actually different. I have updated it. Let me know in the comments down below, by the way, if you think, I know it's been like less than a week, but if you'd already want to see another updated like version 2, because I have made some fairly significant changes to the list already compared to that first profile. But maybe I should go to a few more locals, do a little more testing to feel a little more cemented on that with like more practice than just theory. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, just going over everything in reverse here, of course. In reverse of how we started. Number 1, 100% Labyrinth for me. Number 2, Lady of Laments or just Lair of Darkness. Awesome. Number 3, Zephyr. I'm just reading Zephyr. Zephyr. Number 4, Trap Tricks. Keep an eye on this one more than any of them. Trap Tricks, because if that structure deck is like crazy, this could be my favorite deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! In a year. Dinomorphia, really fun. I love that this is new. Like 2 new archetypes just like from this year on this list is awesome. Subterror, not even on this list, but in the top 5. Machina. And then we like the cool, like you can see a clear pattern. Like from 6 and up, it's like all very heavy control decks, and from 7 to 10 were decks that I still really like, but they just don't play as much of a control game. They're a little more combo / mid-range oriented, which is cool. Also, I think Sky Strikers could be a deck that I end up moving into my top 10. I know we have 2 new cards coming in the OCG. I'm curious to see how those go. And honestly, I just want to see Mystic Mind banned. If Mystic Mind gets banned, I feel so much cooler about playing Sky Striker, because I don't feel bad about playing a bad variant, because a good variant should be playing Mystic Mind if you just want to be playing like the best version possible. But you know, if it's banned, I can't play it, which means I can just play like actual Striker and not just a Mystic Mind shell. You know, so very curious to see where that ends up with their new two new cards and how the deck actually, like how good the deck can be without Mystic Mind. But we'll obviously have to see when we get there. But yeah, there you go. My top 10 favorite decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. I'd love to hear guys' thoughts. Throw me down a quick list for you as well if you want to. And let me know your thoughts on my list as well. I just want to throw this out there. Kind of just been thinking about this and being like, wow, this really is what my top 10 favorite decks of the game are right now. Very cool. So yeah, I'm out of here for today though. Thank you so much for watching. As always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff from your boy down the line. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.